All right, the bread discussion may have distracted chat,
All right.
so I'll hand this back over to you, Beej, if you want to browse around.
Just too many breads. It's a lot of breads.
There were some breads.
Are there just different size of bread boxes?
If there are multiple things in here about how many breads I have eaten, I'm...
Well, no, what's your favorite bread? Or what large loaves have you encountered? Or, hey, Beej.
Yes.
That's one of them.
All right, Paul, can you tell us about... This is some of your favorite large loaves of bread that you've encountered, because clearly you must have a running list. You
What
have a
people want.
tally.
Large loaves of bread.
You said you've seen a pretty big
I mean,
large
I've seen
loaf
some
of
pretty
bread.
big. I've seen some pretty big loaves of bread and other, I guess, and other baked goods too. But my dad, he for a brief amount of time, he wanted to be a commercial baker, and then decided that that is not a fun thing to do.
Okay.
But he still enjoys baking bread.
So was it him that was just making larger and larger loaves of bread, or?
Well, I wouldn't say he makes like giant loaves of bread, but a very substantial loaf of bread, and bread that I really like my dad's bread because I can't get it. He makes some of the heartiest bread. Like, you put it into the toaster,
Right.
and you gotta put it down again. Like, it's got too much thermal mass to toast the first time.
Is it a carbon rod?
You gotta put it in again.
Are you eating your own extruded tuna?
But it is delicious. Also, he tends to, he likes being creative with it in terms of putting in anything that happens to come to hand while he's making it. I'm sure as a trained baker, it's probably a lot more free form than you would do in a commercial baking situation, shall we say?
I mean, yeah, but it does depend on how late at night it is and whether the day's bread is already done. Because if there is leftover dough, I've seen some stuff, Paul. I've seen some stuff.
Tell us about your favorite loaves, Matthew.
Yeah, now I want to know. Actually,
How
this
big
is
do
great.
they get?
I mean,
Yeah, what do bakers get up to after hours?
The stuff that's PG.
The PG stuff.
Erotic cakes, thank you. Yeah.
I didn't work at one of those bakeries.
Did you really? Oh, wow.
No, I did not.
Oh, you did not. I'm sorry.
No. No, that was something that has happened occasionally if there was extra dough left over.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
not for sale to the general public.
So then, I guess, are we talking more like size-wise, like impressive-wise, or like intricacy? Like you have a story to share. It sounds like.
Yeah, so most of the time that I've spent as a professional baker, I worked in commercial bakeries, and a few artisan bakeries. Generally, that's going to be like your Pullman loaves, your larger boules. One of my favorite places that I've worked had a real emphasis on sourdoughs and sour starters.
Okay, must have been an amazing smell.
It very good. But I've also done bread sculptures for presentations
Ooh.
and events. Those are so much fun.
How do you do do you make the bread in relatively unsculpted form and then sculpt with the baked bread, or do you make it with the dough and then cook it and hope that it rises in the way that will make it work?
So most of the time, if you're doing like real bread sculptures, then you're gonna want unleavened.
Oh, okay,
dough.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Sometimes you'll use a leavened loaf for the base, and then build on top of that with unleavened dough, and that's where you'll do cutouts, or you'll use molds.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you make it in a bunch of pieces and then attach the pieces together. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few different ways to do that. One of the easiest ways that I personally like is to use isomalt. And isomalt is like a sugar, but it's not really sweet. But you can cook it up to like hard crack sugar temperature and use it essentially as glue. And that's also what a lot of sugar sculptures are made from.
Huh.
It's a little less forgiving than sugar, like if you're pulling it or blowing it, but it doesn't have as much. It doesn't affect that. It doesn't get as affected by humidity, so it's going to last a lot longer.
Oh, interesting.
And it's something that's sort of you would never want to actually use it for like food, but it's more like a structural thing.
Well, it's definitely edible.
Right.
It just doesn't taste great.
Right. So yeah, it's like for a when you need something edible, but also that it also is structural.
Yeah, and sugar, working with sugar and making sugar sculptures is so much fun.
There's a there was a silly like contest show on Netflix a while that was like we have teams of like a baker and a robotic control, like a robotics person, and you have to make like edible sculptures that are also like robots. It was mostly like a silly idea, but occasionally there were some very fun things.
No, I mean, I could definitely see good ways to do that. I really like kinetic sculptures, and you can do that with like bread or even sugar to a certain extent, chocolate to a certain extent, depending on how what kind of mechanisms you're using. Chocolate sculpting is also a lot of fun. You can carve that a lot easier. So it's I like making presentation pieces. I just don't get a lot of ability to do that because I just don't have a reason to anymore.
Oh, okay.
I feel like there's a hard line between like, there's like food that's made to be delicious and also looks very nice, and food that's like, this is a sculpture. You can eat it if you have to, but we don't recommend it. This is actually just looks amazing, but it's not something that you are supposed to be eating.
Wedding cakes.
Yeah, well, I don't love fondant. It's you can.
Ooh. Is that like a hot take in the bakery world? Being
Not now. It isn't. No.
well, no, it's just for a baker being anti-fondant.
It really depends. Like, there's definitely the more like wedding cake kind of super decorative bakers. I personally, if I'm going to make a cake, I am more of a on the production baker side. So while I enjoyed making showpieces, my main focus was like, I'm gonna make the thing taste good and it'll look fine. Not necessarily it's going to be amazing and
Yeah, this like Instagram piece.
yeah,
That's fair.
because I think that hot take. I think that's more important
Yeah.
because
There's-
a lot of those wedding cakes also use like Rice Krispie
Yep.
as bases.
Yep. My sister made a Ministerith for her brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. For his wedding.
Rice Krispies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like whole Rice Krispies, not like ground
Yeah.
up. or
No, like
anything.
Rice Krispie.
Because it holds a
treat.
form.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you can mold that super easy into whatever shape you need.
So like at that point, it's not even really a cake.
It's got cake in it. It's got cake layers, but a lot is.
You can put cake on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But bases or structures or whatever, you're like
Yeah.
making it a Rice Krispie treats.
Structurally, it's Rice Krispie.
Interesting. Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. That Ministerith, my sister this year went and reclaimed the styrofoam forms that were inside of it. so she had to like wash away the Rice Krispie and the icing from this like 10-year-old cake.
Oh.
And there were wasps.
Oh.
There were wasps, Beej.
Wait, isn't Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that also a kind of cake? Or no,
It
she
was
made.
shaped like
Minas
Minas
Tirith.
Tirith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was. I see. I thought like Minas Tirith was just like a common type of cake.
I like that people are like, oh no, 10-year-old cake. Oh, I have a story.
Yeah, who came up with the like? Oh, it's tradition to like put a slice of cake in the freezer and eat it later on.
White people? I
Don't
have to
do it.
assume.
Oh my god, don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's,
you
yeah.
can do it, just no one actually freezes it correctly.
It's so bad.
So anyway,
I feel like that's one of those traditions that like somebody came up with at some point and like nobody wants to do, but
You know.
for some reason.
whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, Paul, and that's meant to test the strength of your relationship a year on.
Ah,
So I, after Heather and I got married, I said I want to keep we're gonna keep either the top section or a piece of the top section of our cake.
Because you had an Adventure Time cake.
We did,
with
yeah.
with a cool, like, Jake and Finn.
We
thing.
still have our topper, in fact.
Yeah.
Though it lives in a box because we don't really have a good place to put it yet. It'll probably come out eventually. But yeah, it was Jake and Lady Rainicorn.
Yeah.
It's very cute.
But
Which the person did a very nice job of, but inexplicably put on a wooden base to go on top of our cake. And I was like, I don't feel right about putting like something porous on top of a cake. But we figured it out. And it looked very pretty. I really quite liked it. She took a bit of her tulle and she turned it into a veil for Lady Rainicorn. So it looked very good. Anyway, so we kept a piece of the top, either the whole top or just a piece of the top of that cake in our freezer at home. We got married during the winter, so we left it in the trunk of our car on the way home. So it was already in -20 outside, and we got home, put it in the fridge. I didn't touch it for a year, but also my parents had been, they go back and forth. They snowbird, and so they had said, "Hey, can you keep something in your freezer for us because." We don't want if there's a power outage, we don't want everything in our freezer to spoil, but we can't just keep this there, so we're just going to leave it with you. I'm like, sure, not a problem. This is a few years prior. So for years, I'd had in my deep freeze, I'd had something from them as well that eventually got moved into my inside freezer. And so at one point, I finally just said to my mom, I said, like I was taking our one out to eat it, which I did have some of, and I did not die. It was, and I don't know how anything could grow in it because it was dense like a loaf of pumpernickel.
It's not that it will kill you, it's that it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
did Heather have some?
No. Hey!
1 point.
I asked her to have some. She said no. So I had enough for the two of us and figured that would be a test of our relationship. That I'm willing to eat her terrible cake as well. So.
Because you had to.
Because I had to at this point.
Now,
prove myself.
when did Ian start stalling the bus?
At about 15 minutes before, like basically when the dance party hit, he slowed down to a stop at that point.
So he didn't need to
No.
to do that.
No.
No.
Yeah. Like he was 45 minutes. I thought it was going to be like 5 minutes.
I thought so, too.
That's the way he was talking it up, and since he has all the bus stops memorized,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Ian stopped it right before the point. It's going
He
to happen
also
now.
knew where the exact number in the odometer was, and he was giving lots of leeway for it.
Yeah.
And
Anyway.
so when the point screen came up, that point took 8 hours and 42 minutes, which is probably a record.
Yeah.
breaking records on Zeta.
We could drive for 8 hours in just over 8 hours.
This is causing the VST statistical fits. I'm sure that they're kind of like this throws off a balance, but
Yeah, is that the slowest run we've ever had?
yeah,
You
it sounds.
can make a slower one.
Well, now that you can stall the bus, theoretically you have unlimited.
Yeah, so Ian was giving a little workshop afterwards out in the friend zone, so he was saying that as long as you're not touching the sides, you don't crash.
You can
Yeah.
idle in the middle of the road.
That's what he was saying.
Okay. Well, let him cook. We'll figure this stuff out. Anyway, my parents had these two things. This is the actual crux of the story. And so my mom's like, one that is wrapped in shopping bags from stores that have been closed for 20 years. Like there was a Woodward's bag around this as well, and it was something. It was a lump wrapped in foil, wrapped in multiple other plastic bags. And
Any like sheepskin and
No.
oil, like
No.
wax.
And I know what it was, and she did say she wanted it back. That was their wedding cake, and they had been married for about 40 years by this point.
Did you eat the cake?
I didn't touch their cake. Are you kidding me? That would kill somebody. I'm pretty sure there's been something in that. I don't know if it's ever been unfrozen and refrozen, but they have had that because. And I asked her about it, like, what happened? She's like, well, we had meant to eat it a year after our. And I'm like, okay, well then why didn't you eat it like when you remembered? And it's like, well, we forgot about it for a long time because you have a chest freezer. It gets to the bottom of your chest freezer, and I'm like, so why did she? Well, at this point. Why throw it out? I think it was kind of just, well, at this point, ... Like, no real explanation why they still had it. I don't even know if they still have it or not. Maybe on their 50th, we'll haul it out and be like, we're going to show it to you, and now you get to decide on whether you're going to keep it or not, because it's their 50th anniversary next year, so...
I use
Preserve
that
it
I
in
use that
resin.
argument for old milk in my fridge.
Yeah.
You know? At this point, why throw it out?
Yeah. It's established a home. It has a colony.
It might be the cake of Dorian Gray. Like it might
If it's what's keeping my parents
keeping
alive...
your parents together. They're
Yeah.
very solid.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely all about that. The other thing they had though that was in there too, that was packaged with it, like they gave me two things, right? The other thing that was in there, and this is my favorite part of the story to tell, is there was a cake in there as well, also wrapped in foil, but with like newer bags around it as well. But it was also completely wrapped in aluminum foil. And I opened that one up because Mom's like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that at all.
They gave you something to store in your freezer without knowing what it was?
She had no idea what it was that she wanted to give, because she just thought she gave me her cake.
And well, you know, if you have it, you might as well.
Yeah. So I said, I'm not opening it. So I sent it home with her. And she got home, and she had to know, so she opened it. And what was in there...
Was it their parents' cake?
It was
Your brother's cake.
It was a cherry cake that my grandmother, my nan, my mom's mom, made for Christmas about 3 years prior. And my nan had passed away in the meantime.
So that cake was not keeping her alive.
No, it was not. This cake, maybe 4 years prior, it was like the last cake she had made. It ended up in my parents' deep freeze. And my mom tried a bit, like because she let it thaw. It had been frozen the whole time. She let it thaw out, and she was like, yeah, and put icing on it, cut up bits of it, and shared it with all the kids. It was the last cake we got to have for my grandmother after she passed away. It was awesome. It tasted so good. and now I'm like this.
I have heard these similar stories so many times about the cakes that come out like 20 years later. So when me and my wife decided to do the opposite, and we didn't freeze any of our cake. We just took our toppers, we put them on our shelf.
Yeah.
Two printed poros from League of Legends. One's in a suit, one's in has a little bridal veil on it, and then we
Cute.
just put them up on the shelf. And they're like, keep the cake?
No. I threw out so much of my wedding cake after we had our wedding. The entire lower layer was untouched, and it probably weighed about 20 pounds.
The trick is to have one small cake, and then we did cupcakes for all our guests.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I shouldn't have spent $450 on a wedding cake
Why not?
because I threw away almost all of it.
What percentage was Rice Krispie?
None of it, but probably about 10% fondant. Yeah. You'd like this, Matthews. They showed up to drop off our cake, and as they were leaving, I overheard them say, "Let's get out of here before it falls over." Yeah.
Did they not use rods?
There was internal structure to the cake. It wasn't tiered in that way. It was a piece and then another one on top. Well, it was actually supposed to be cut like this, and it was supposed to be formed in this really cool looking way.
Carving off.
It was like they had rods through the middle with the plastic thing on top. And then each layer was sitting on top of that thing with like a rod going through the middle, but it wasn't a tiered thing with like space between, like that you could see between. It was just layer, like a sandwich.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you should still have
I would have thought so. And it was all very expensive, like Wilton stuff that they'd used to make it with. And I'm like, well, I'm keeping all of this. You're not getting it back because clearly you think this is going to fall over. But it was meant to be cut at an angle, I believe. And and I think what I got was just 3 layers and stuff. And it just, yeah, we're not.
I mean, it did have a tilt to it.
It did have a bit of a tilt to it, you're right. But, that's whatever. If it had fallen over, it would have been an excellent story to tell. So I, kind of in a way wish that it did, but I have the photos of me throwing it out, which is, because I said to Heather, I'm like, take photos of this. I want to remember that we had to throw out a section that was this big around.
Oh my god.
The very bottom piece. And my mother was like, why don't you take that to like we got married on New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
On New Year's Day, she's like, why don't you just take that to like the homeless shelter or something, because they like it when you do things like that. And I'm like, do they want a cake that's been in the fridge all? I don't. Also, it's New Year's Day. I don't know what to do, and I have to travel. Like, you take it to the homeless shelter or to the Mustard Seed or to wherever, and ultimately we just couldn't decide what to do with it. So I'm like, I guess I just have to throw it out. So.
Also, I know a lot of shelters won't take prepared food
Yeah, that's fair.
just because
You don't know what's going on.
exactly.
Who prepared it?
Who
Yeah.
sneezed on it, who licked it.
Yeah, it was out all night, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's excellent advice, in fact, too, for people. Yeah, keep that in mind. Right. Hey,
Well, anyways, there's cookies in the.
since we're on,
There's what?
there's cookies.
No, I'm just saying there's prepared food.
Oh yes.
Oh.
Okay, quick then. What is your favorite type of bread? Going around the room. I think I'll just lock myself in at sourdough. Sarah,
Same.
I like a miche.
never had that.
It does use a starter, so you get some sour to it.
Okay.
But generally, it has like some wholemeal or rye flour, just make it a little interesting.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, kind of like a brown, bit of a rye thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like whole grains. I like finding the little chunky things to chew
The
on.
bits.
Yeah, I like the little bits, like spelt or something.
Keep you interested in the bread.
Yeah.
Paul.
I mean, I like a good heavy dead spread, as I mentioned. Also, but on the other hand, also light fluffy bread is good too.
Alright,
You know,
yeah.
I like a lot of breads.